Stop doing crunches. Stop forcing yourself onto a yoga mat that hurts your knees to get down to, and even harder to get up from. Stop pushing through hip pain on a treadmill because someone told you walking is the gold standard for seniors. Because here's what almost nobody in mainstream medicine wants to admit out loud. If you're over 70, there is one exercise you can do without ever leaving your bed that builds more functional strength, protects your independence better, and lowers your fall risk more effectively than walking ever will. And I'm not talking about a mild stretch. I'm talking about a specific, science-backed pattern of movement that reshapes the muscle fibers that keep you upright, keep you steady, and keep you out of a wheelchair. I've watched people arrive using walkers and leave walking their grandkids to the mailbox unassisted. Researchers looking at frail elderly adults, average age in the mid-80s, put them through just 10 weeks of targeted strength work, twice a week. The result was a measurable increase in both muscle strength and the actual quality of the muscle tissue itself, not just its size. Let that sink in. These weren't spring chickens. These were frail, elderly men and women, some approaching 90, and their bodies still responded. Separately, a study on elderly women dealing with early knee osteoarthritis found that 8 weeks of a specific isometric protocol, meaning muscle contraction without joint movement, reduced markers of inflammation in their blood while improving both strength and knee function. If a stiff, arthritic knee can respond to controlled, still body exercise in just 2 months, imagine what your body can do. Now here's the tease, because I don't want to bury the lead. The number one movement on this list, the one I consider the single most powerful bed exercise for anyone over 70, isn't something you've likely seen on any other channel. Stick with me, because we're counting down from 5, and every item builds toward that one. But before we dive in, I want to know who's watching. Drop a comment and tell me your age, and tell me one thing you've stopped doing because your body wouldn't let you anymore. Whether that's kneeling to garden, carrying groceries in one trip, or getting up off the floor without help. I read every single comment on this channel. Every one. And honestly, they shape what I choose to cover next. So don't just watch passively. Talk to me. It targets a muscle group most people over 70 have almost completely forgotten they own. And reactivating it is, in my clinical experience, the single biggest predictor of whether my patients keep their independence into their 90s or lose it in their 70s. All right, let's start the countdown. Number 5. Number 5 is the one people dismiss because it looks too gentle to matter, and that's exactly the mistake that cost them their mobility. It's called the Supine Marching Bridge, and if you've never heard that term, don't worry, I'll walk you through it in plain language in a moment. Researchers studying muscle strength assessment protocols in adults averaging around 70 years old have shown that the glute and lower back muscles, the ones that fire when you bridge your hips off the bed, are some of the most reliably measurable and, more importantly, most trainable muscles in the aging body. What that tells us clinically is these muscles respond predictably to load, even in advanced age, when almost every other system in the body is becoming less predictable. Why does this matter specifically for someone over 70 and not, say, someone at 40? Because after roughly age 75, your body loses close to a third of its ability to rapidly recruit muscle fibers when you need them suddenly, like when you trip on a curb or catch yourself on a wet bathroom floor. Scientists call this a decline in rate of force development. Think of it like this. Imagine your muscles are a fire department. In your 40s, when the alarm rings, the trucks are out the door in 10 seconds. In your 70s and 80s, if that fire department is untrained, it takes them 30, 40, sometimes 60 seconds to even get moving. By then, the fire, in this case, the fall, has already happened. The Supine Marching Bridge retrains your glutes and your deep core to respond fast, right there in bed, with zero impact on your joints. There's also the anabolic resistance piece, which I'll explain simply. As we age, our muscles become stubborn. They don't respond to the same stimulus they used to. A 25-year-old can do one light set of an exercise and get a strong muscle-building signal. Someone in their 70s or 80s often needs more repetition, more consistency, and more targeted tension to get that same signal through. This is called anabolic resistance, and it's one of the biggest reasons older adults lose muscle even when they think they're staying active. Isometric style bridging, holding the contraction rather than rushing through it, appears to punch through some of that resistance more efficiently than fast, low-effort movement. Here's how to do it, and how to prepare. Lie on your back, knees bent, feet flat on the mattress, arms resting at your sides. Gently squeeze your glutes and lift your hips a few inches off the bed. Hold for a count of 3 to 5 seconds, then lower slowly. Start with 5 to 8 repetitions, once a day. The optimal timing, based on what I see clinically, is first thing in the morning, before you even swing your legs out of bed, because your joints are least inflamed and your nervous system is fresh. For synergy, pair this with a few slow, deep breaths on each hold, exhaling as you lift. That breath control activates your deep core stabilizers at the same time, giving you two systems working for the price of one movement. I think of a patient, Frank, 78, from a small town outside Dayton, Ohio. Frank came to me terrified of his own bathroom because he'd fallen twice trying to get up from the toilet. Within 6 weeks of doing this simple bridge every morning before getting out of bed, Frank told me, almost in disbelief, that he stood up from a low porch chair without pushing off the armrest for the first time in 3 years. That's not a dramatic transformation on paper. But to Frank, that was everything. Number 4. Number 4 is the seated in bed row, sometimes called a towel row, and this one directly attacks a problem almost nobody talks about: the slow collapse of your upper back posture that happens after 70. A study assessing isometric strength protocols in older adults specifically measured seated row strength alongside other key movements. And researchers found this measurement to be one of the most reliable indicators of functional upper body strength in aging populations, meaning it correlates strongly with a person's actual ability to do daily tasks, not just their performance on a machine. That's important, because we don't care about gym numbers here. We care about whether you can pull a heavy door open, lift a grandchild, or catch yourself with your arms if you start to fall forward. Why does this matter specifically for aging bodies? After about age 70, the muscles between your shoulder blades and along your upper spine, the ones responsible for keeping you from hunching forward, begin to weaken faster than almost any other muscle group, largely due to years of sitting, reduced activity, and something called sarcopenia, the medical term simply for age-related muscle loss. Think of your mitochondria like the engine of a delivery truck. In your 30s, that engine runs clean and powerful. By your 70s, if it hasn't been maintained, it's sputtering, using more fuel to deliver less power. Targeted resistance work, even something as simple as a bed row using a towel or resistance band, has been shown to stimulate mitochondrial repair mechanisms, essentially tuning that engine back up. To do this exercise, loop a long towel or a soft resistance band around your feet while seated upright in bed, holding one end in each hand. Pull your elbows back, squeezing your shoulder blades together, then release slowly. 10 to 12 repetitions, once daily, ideally in the early evening, which is when I find patients have the most consistent grip strength and the least joint stiffness. For synergy, pair this with a protein-rich snack within about an hour of exercising, something like a hard-boiled egg or a small serving of Greek yogurt, because your muscles need available amino acids to actually use the signal you just gave them. Exercise without adequate protein around it is like sending a delivery truck out with no cargo. The truck runs, but nothing gets delivered. Now, before we get to number 3, I need a favor from you. If this information is landing, if you're recognizing your own body or your own parent's body in what I'm describing, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel right now. It genuinely helps this information reach more seniors who are scrolling past louder, flashier videos that don't actually explain the why behind what they're telling you. I put a lot of research into every single one of these videos, and your subscription tells me to keep doing it. All right, let's keep going. Number 3. Number 3 is the supine hip abduction, and I'll be honest, this is the exercise most likely to prevent the single fall that changes everything. Studies using isokinetic and isometric strength testing in elderly populations have consistently identified hip and lower limb strength, particularly on the outer hip, as one of the strongest predictors of balance and fall risk in adults over 70. One test-retest reliability study involving over 50 elderly participants found that lower limb strength measurements were not only trainable, but remarkably consistent and responsive to targeted work, even in advanced age. Why the outer hip specifically? Because these muscles, called your hip abductors, are what stop you from tipping sideways when you shift your weight, like when you're walking on an uneven sidewalk or turning quickly to answer someone calling your name. After 75, many of my patients have hip abductors so weak that a simple gust of wind or a slightly uneven curb is enough to send them off balance. Walking alone, even daily walking, does very little to strengthen these specific muscles, because when you walk in a straight line, your body avoids challenging that sideways stability. It's like driving a car for years, but never once practicing parallel parking. You can drive fine on the highway and still panic the moment you need to maneuver sideways. There's also an inflammation angle here worth understanding. Chronic low-grade inflammation, sometimes called inflammaging, is now recognized as one of the primary drivers of muscle weakness and joint pain in older adults. That knee osteoarthritis study I mentioned earlier found that after 8 weeks of a controlled isometric protocol, inflammatory markers in the blood, specific proteins the body produces during inflammation, measurably decreased. Muscle contraction, even gentle, controlled contraction like what we're doing here, appears to have an anti-inflammatory effect throughout the body, not just in the muscle being worked. To perform this one, lie on your side in bed, bottom knee bent for stability, top leg straight. Lift your top leg up toward the ceiling about 12 to 18 inches, keeping your toes pointed forward, not up toward the ceiling, which is a common mistake that shifts the work away from the right muscles. Hold for 2 seconds at the top, lower slowly. Do 8 to 10 repetitions per side, once daily. I recommend doing this one in the late morning, after you've been up and moving for an hour or two, so your hip joint is warmed up and lubricated with synovial fluid, the natural fluid that cushions your joints. For synergy, pair this with a 5-minute walk immediately afterward if you're able, even just around your bedroom. This reinforces the new strength pattern into your actual gait, teaching your brain to use that outer hip muscle the moment you stand up and start moving. I think about Dorothy, 81, from a suburb outside Tampa, Florida. Dorothy's biggest fear wasn't dying, it was falling and being found on the floor by a neighbor, unable to get up on her own. After about 5 weeks of this hip exercise, done consistently in bed, Dorothy told me she caught herself mid-stumble on a rug edge, something that would have put her on the ground before, and simply steadied herself and kept walking. Number 2. Number 2 is the Isometric Wall Press, adapted here for the bed using a headboard or a sturdy pillow stack. And this is where we start moving into serious territory, because this exercise targets something most people never think about until they've already lost it. The strength required to push yourself up from a seated or lying position without using your hands. This is directly connected to a measurement clinicians call the sit-to-stand test, one of the most respected functional aging assessments in all of geriatric medicine. Research on frail elderly adults, including those in their 80s and 90s, has repeatedly shown that structured strength training focused on pressing movements produces measurable improvements in both muscle strength and actual muscle quality, meaning denser, more metabolically efficient tissue, not just bigger muscles. This matters enormously because muscle quality, not just muscle size, is what predicts whether you can actually get yourself up off a chair, a bed, or the floor. Why does pressing strength decline so dramatically after 70? Part of it is anabolic resistance again, your muscles becoming less responsive to normal daily movement. But part of it is neurological. The connection between your brain and your muscle fibers, called the neuromuscular junction, becomes less efficient with age, meaning your brain has to work harder to send the same signal to your muscle that it used to send effortlessly. Think of it like an old telephone line with static on it. The message still gets through, but it's weaker and slower than it used to be. Isometric pressing, where you push against something immovable and hold, has been shown in research settings to be one of the most efficient ways to re-strengthen that brain-to-muscle signal, precisely because it demands sustained, focused effort rather than a quick, sloppy movement. To do this in bed, sit upright against your headboard or a firm stack of pillows. Place both palms flat against the headboard or wall at chest height. Press forward and hold for 5 to 8 seconds, as if you're trying to push the wall away, then release. Repeat 6 to 8 times, once or twice daily. Late afternoon tends to be the ideal window for this one, when your blood pressure and joint mobility are typically at their most stable point in the day. For synergy, pair this exercise with hydration, specifically drinking a full glass of water beforehand. Muscle tissue is roughly 75% water, and even mild dehydration, which is extremely common in older adults because thirst signals weaken with age, can measurably reduce muscular force output. You could be doing everything right with the exercise and still get a fraction of the benefit if your muscles are running dry. Now let's talk about number 1, the one I teased at the very beginning of this video. Number 1, the single most powerful bed exercise for anyone over 70 is the isometric core and pelvic floor brace, combined with controlled diaphragmatic breathing. I know that sounds clinical, so let me break it into plain language. Because once you understand why this beats walking, you'll understand why I built this entire list around it. Here's the foundational problem. Your deep core, the muscles that wrap around your spine like a natural corset, along with your pelvic floor, the muscles that support your bladder, bowel, and lower organs, are the true foundation for every single movement your body makes, from rolling over in bed to standing up to catching yourself during a stumble. And here's what almost nobody explains to seniors. These muscles decline faster and more silently than almost any other muscle group in the body, because we rarely challenge them directly in daily life. Research on core and trunk strength testing in elderly women found extremely high reliability and responsiveness of the deep trunk muscles to targeted isometric testing, confirming that these muscles, Even in inactive elderly populations who hadn't exercised in months could be reliably assessed and, by extension, reliably trained. What makes this especially significant is that trunk and pelvic floor weakness is directly linked to two of the biggest threats to independence after 70: falls, because a weak core means poor reactive balance, and incontinence, which is one of the leading reasons older adults report reduced quality of life and increased social isolation, often more distressing to patients than pain itself. Here's why this exercise specifically outperforms walking for this age group. Walking is what I'd call a downstream activity. It uses the strength you already have. It doesn't really build new strength in the deep, stabilizing muscles because your body is naturally efficient, meaning it will always default to using the strongest, most available muscles, rather than the ones that actually need the work. The deep core and pelvic floor almost never get challenged during a normal walk, which is why so many of my patients walk regularly for years and still experience falls, still experience bladder leakage, still feel unstable getting out of a car. This one movement, done lying flat in bed, directly targets what walking leaves behind. To perform it, lie on your back with knees bent, feet flat. Take a slow breath in through your nose, letting your belly rise. As you exhale slowly through pursed lips, gently draw your belly button down toward your spine, while also lightly lifting and squeezing the pelvic floor muscles, the same ones you'd use to stop the flow of urine midstream without actually practicing on the toilet. Hold that gentle brace for 5 seconds while continuing to breathe normally, not holding your breath, then release completely. Repeat 10 times, twice daily, ideally once in the morning to activate your core before you even attempt to sit up, and once in the evening to reinforce the pattern before sleep. For synergy, pair this with magnesium-rich foods earlier in your day, such as leafy greens, almonds, or pumpkin seeds, because magnesium plays a direct role in proper muscle contraction and relaxation. And many older adults are mildly deficient without realizing it, which can make these deep, subtle contractions harder to feel and control. I want to tell you about Margaret, 74, from a quiet neighborhood outside Portland, Oregon. Margaret came to me after 2 falls in 1 year, both times reaching for something slightly out of range while standing. She was, in her own words, terrified of becoming one of those people who ends up in a home. We started with this exact exercise, 5 minutes, twice a day in her bed, before she even stood up in the morning. 12 weeks later, Margaret wasn't just more stable. She told me with tears in her eyes that she'd gone 3 months without a single incontinence episode for the first time in nearly 4 years, and that she'd finally felt confident enough to babysit her granddaughter alone again, something she'd quietly given up doing because she didn't trust her own body around a toddler. That, to me, is what this exercise actually delivers. Not just strength. Trust in your own body again. So, here's what I want you to walk away with today, no pun intended. Independence after 70 isn't lost all at once. It's lost quietly, one small avoided task at a time, one skipped grandchild pickup, one dinner invitation declined because getting in and out of the car feels risky, one bathroom trip approached with fear instead of confidence. And the reversal of that decline doesn't require a gym membership, a treadmill, or forcing your aching joints through movements your body is begging you to stop. It requires 5 specific, intentional movements you can do lying in your own bed, in the privacy and safety of your own home, starting tonight or tomorrow morning. Your muscles, even in your 70s, 80s, and 90s, are still listening. They are still capable of adapting, rebuilding, and responding if you simply give them the right signal, consistently, with patience. It is genuinely never too late to reclaim the version of yourself that gets up off the floor without help, that walks without fear of falling, that says yes to babysitting the grandkids instead of quietly saying no. That version of you is not gone. She or he is just waiting for the right signal. All of the studies I referenced today are linked down in the description below, so you can read them yourself and share them with your doctor or physical therapist before starting anything new. If this video gave you something you didn't know you needed, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next one. And hit that like button so more seniors searching for real answers can actually find this information instead of another generic walking video. And before you go, I want to hear from you in the comments. Which one of these 5 exercises are you going to try first tonight? And what is the one activity you're hoping to get back to doing without fear? I'll be reading every single answer.